Team Starkid's Hatchetfield series is a multimedia collection of horror comedy stories all taking place in the fictional island town of Hatchetfield, currently consisting of 3 stage musicals, 2 seasons of Nightmare Time stories, and a short film. Every installment follows the island's citizens facing some form of the horrors. From apocalypses to possessed cars to killer songs, these people know no peace. The episodic nature of the series' installments, taking place in separate timelines with varying continuities, lends great opportunity for character exploration. We get to see recurring characters in different horrific scenarios and see what changes and what remains consistent based on what they go through. There's a lot to dig into when it comes to the citizens of Hatchetfield, and that brings us to our subject of discussion for today. Grace Chasity is a fascinating little lady, and I want to put her in a terrarium for observation. That's what this video is. Grace is one of the main recurring characters in the series. She was mentioned by name in the first 2 musical installments.
So I said, why don't you try dating someone like Grace Chasity? And she goes, no, Grace Chasity is a nerdy prude.
Grace is out of town. I couldn't find another sitter.
And would make her actual debut in the 2nd season of Nightmare Time stories. Presently, she's appeared in the Nightmare Time episodes Perky's Buds and Abstinence Camp, the stage musical Nerdy Prudes Must Die, and the short film Workin' Boys. These are the stories I'm going to discuss today as we do a fun little deep dive on Grace as a character, examining her foundations, her arcs, and what appears to make her tick. So grab your Bible and your axe and join me, and let's fill up the bath and brew a nice hot batch of dirty girl soup. I can't fucking say that. Part 1. Holier Than Thou Church Girl. Grace's religiously motivated moral code is the central foundation of her character. She's a very devout Christian, and this naturally informs her actions and the trajectory of her arcs. Now, I'm going to be upfront here. I live in a Christian culture, but I'm not Christian, and I never have been. I don't have the perspective that someone with a more direct history with Christianity will have, and I'm not going to pretend I do. This analysis is coming explicitly from the perspective of a culturally Christian agnostic, but I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't feel like I had something valuable to say, so, just heads up. Grace is consistently introduced as an irritating presence with a moral superiority complex. She positions herself as a moral authority and looks down on people around her who don't adhere to her biblical moral code. A lot of people who've had bad experiences with Christianity will know someone like this. A person who firmly believes they are on the only right track and looks down on other people who aren't on that track. People who disagree with them are wrong, full stop, and need to be corrected and saved. That needing to be saved belief is a foundational one of Christianity. Humans are born into sin, and we have to strive for goodness and forgiveness by following the teachings of Jesus. Those who don't live in sin and get sentenced to eternal punishment, born sick, commanded to be well, and all that. It's a deeply frustrating, but admittedly well-meaning kind of superiority, and Grace is a great personification of this. She is well-meaning. Many of her actions stem from a genuine desire to help people or support causes she cares about. She's misguided and self-righteous, though, only willing to engage on her own terms and not open to other perspectives. This is the foundation of Grace as a character. Her debut appearance as a tertiary character in Perky's Buds sets this up extremely well. We see her protesting Emma Perkins' pot farm with her church friend Gabe on the basis that Emma's drugs are doing harm to the community as well as the local nighthawk population who have been eating the weed. Checkertail nighthawks are a protected species exclusive to the island, and Grace threatens legal action over the birds potentially being harmed. In response, Emma and her farmhand Ziggs throw manure on Grace and Gabe to drive them off the property. The nighthawks go on to gain psychic powers from eating the weed, taking over the farm and enslaving Emma and Ziggs to grow more for them. Emma briefly escapes and tries to find help, running into Grace. Because Emma is tattered, frantic, and stinks of weed, Grace assumes she's high, and whatever distress she's in is her own doing.
You made this bed, Emma, and now you shall reap what you sow. La 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 la.
She bikes along on her merry way and leaves Emma at the mercy of the flock. At the end of the story, Emma's burned down her farm to kill all the birds, and the fire is too widespread for her and Ziggs to escape. Despite accepting their fate, they're saved by police and firefighters arriving on the scene. A cop says they received a call from Grace Chasity about a woman high on drugs about to do something drastic. Emma and Ziggs survive because of Grace, but all the dead nighthawks at the scene get them arrested, the exact consequence Grace threatened at the beginning. Now, I may not be with her on the anti-drug angle, but the nighthawk protection angle? Grace is in the right. Ziggs admits they've been shooting at the birds, and yeah, killing a protected species is not a good thing to do. The issue of harming the nighthawks changes when they gain psychic powers and heightened intelligence, including speech. The birds hold Emma and Ziggs captive and use them as tools, treat them like animals, violate their bodily autonomy, keep them obedient by threatening violence, and they're capable of fucking mind control. When Emma and Ziggs are being tortured like this, killing the birds becomes a much more sympathetic and understandable thing to do, I think. I certainly don't feel conflicted about them doing it. As soon as Ezekiel starts talking, I want to punt him into the sun. Grace isn't there for any of that, though. She has no clue that Emma is actually being tormented by sentient Nighthawks. She has no reason to believe that. She just sees the woman who runs the local pot farm raving like a fucking lunatic.
It's the Nighthawks. They hate my weed. They're smart now, Grace. And they're trying to kill me.
A drug user who's pushing her drugs on the community, flying into a mad frenzy in her underwear, stinking of weed? What else would Grace expect? Emma brought this on herself. It was bound to happen eventually. Grace warned her. So she leaves and calls the police, and lo and behold, the people who told her they've been shooting at the protected Nighthawk population are arrested for massacring dozens of Nighthawks. From a full narrative perspective, primarily following Emma and Ziggs, this ending is terribly ironic. From Grace's perspective, it's perfectly reasonable, and she's a champion of animal protection who was right all along. She saved the town from their influence and saved them from themselves. Patterns and consistency are a big theme in Hatchetfield stories, and Grace's first appearance sets up her pattern right away. Every time she appears, she saves the day, often confirming her own biases, and, as we'll see going forward, stepping onto a dark path in the process. Part 2. The biggest prude you'll ever meet. On that note, we roll into Abstinence Camp, where Grace has a bigger role. We open on cool, popular Stephanie Lauder puking in the high school bathroom on the last day of school. It's the morning after a party, but Grace doesn't know that, and when she finds Steph sick in the bathroom, she jumps to the conclusion that Steph must be having morning sickness.
Are you pregnant?
Yeah, Grace. I'm pregnant.
Hard cut to Steph being sent to abstinence camp for the summer to dissuade rumors about her, the mayor's daughter, being pregnant, let alone sexually active. Grace meets up with Steph after check-in, happy she's there and relieved she's getting help. She spread the pregnancy rumors, humiliating Steph and ruining her summer. Still, her intentions weren't malicious. She very genuinely believed that Steph was pregnant and needed help, and took what she saw as the correct action. A huge foundational aspect of Grace's character is specifically her purity beliefs as informed by her religion. Intimacy before marriage is a sin, self-pleasure is a sin, lust itself, mere sexual thought, is one of the 7 deadly sins. Honoring God means denying the desires of the flesh, etc., etc. Grace thinks Steph is indulging in dangerous, sinful behavior that will damn her soul and wants to save her. This is how she saves her, unaware that what she believes Steph needs is only making things worse for her. Grace is overall very unaware of how Steph feels about her. She likes Steph, a lot in fact. She's convinced they're friends. She really genuinely cares about Steph and wants her to be saved. Her interactions with Steph are the most genuinely friendly Grace gets with someone who disagrees with her. Very hate the sin, love the sinner. Steph, on the other hand, straight up hates Grace, has very little patience for her, and no interest in making nice. Steph is sort of the straight man counterpart to the exaggerated satire of Grace. She's the grounded one who comments on how overtly wrong Grace is.
I'm normal. You're weird. This whole place is weird.
Around the campfire that night, Gabe tries to scare the new campers with the story of Lumberax, the mad woodsman who lurks the witchwood and kills people who give in to their carnal urges. This camp is intended to teach and enforce complete abstinence, and the years-old Lumberax story is a method of scaring campers straight. Grace is not a fan of this story. She doesn't think anyone should need fear as a reason to abstain.
Virginity just rocks.
She and Gabe clean up after the campfire, and Gabe tries to confess his feelings for her. Grace is completely clueless, thinking he's merely expressing the same platonic fondness she shares. Grace is consistently shown to not think about romance like ever, which is interesting. She's oblivious to Gabe's confession, I think, because he's masking it in chaste, palatable romantic language. We'll see later when she clocks a more direct approach. I'll have some comparisons to draw between Gabe and Max when we get there. For now, Grace walks away blissfully oblivious, and Gabe drops the choir boy act he's presumably been putting on to get closer to her.
Fucking tease! Sending all the signals? How am I supposed to sleep with this chubby? Guess I'll go make a wallet
Failing to work out his sexual frustrations, Gabe gives in to his own carnal urges, and since this is a horror story, the campfire legend is real, and Gabe is killed by the Mad Woodsman. In the washroom that morning, Steph finds Grace coming out of the shower with a bathing suit on. This is a regular habit of hers because she believes that even seeing your own body naked can lead to temptation. The old slippery slope fallacy. Big ups to Steph for realizing how fucking dangerous that is. This kind of health is way undertaught, and I love seeing a character who's outspoken about it. Steph intends to shower naked, naturally, and Grace won't let her, claiming that Steph's an addict and needs help to stay clean. She refuses to leave Steph alone at the risk of her relapsing. To avoid Grace's help, Steph goes to shower in the boys' washroom, and Grace runs off to get the camp directors for help. Steph showers a stall away from like-minded nerd Pete. They flirt, discussing the validity of the Mad Woodsman story and deciding to shower together to test it out. Grace's tattling inadvertently saves them, as unbeknownst to them, Lumbrax has been lurking, ready to kill them for getting freaky in the shower. At the last second, the camp directors bust in to split them up before anything can happen. They're punished with solitary confinement for the rest of the summer, which upsets Grace when she finds out, and she goes to confront the camp directors about it. The camp directors, Girl Jerry and Boy Jerry, have been covering up the murder scenes left behind by Lumbrax. They found and buried Gabe after he was killed, and Grace walks in on them with the bodies of 2 other campers who were killed earlier. Grace loves abstinence camp. She looks forward to it every year. Implicitly, she's known the Jerrys for years, at least since she first started going to camp, which would probably be around early adolescence. As a teenager, I too had summer programs I looked forward to every year, with directors and counselors I'd known since I was 11, some since I was 7. Those are adults you grew up with, adults you trust and admire, adults who share your interests and often beliefs, adults you might see as mentor figures. And let me tell you, if I had ever walked in on the counselors at my music camp or the directors of my film school with the dead bodies of 2 of my peers, it would have fucking broken something in me. So Grace, her perception of her mentors shattered, runs away, and Girl Jerry chases after her. Girl Jerry admits to Grace that Lumbrax the Mad Woodsman is her son, who she had young and raised in shame and secrecy in the woods. She tried to teach him the importance of abstinence, and the lessons simply went too far.
But there's something about Witchwood Forest. Things grow here. They grow fast and big and different. It wasn't what I intended. I gave him the axe to chop firewood.
Meanwhile, Steph broke herself and Pete out of solitary confinement, and they made their way through the woods to try and escape camp. After a confrontation with Boy Jerry, they had themselves a little smooch and alerted Lumbrax of scandalous behavior. Steph's scream draws Grace and Girl Jerry running to help, and Grace makes it in time to put herself between Steph and the Mad Woodsman's blade. Grace and Lumbrax have a sort of immediate instinctual understanding of each other. He can sense how big of a prude she is, and that by all of his... Child. Outside my window. You gonna scream? The kids outside my window love to scream. He can sense how big of a prude she is, that by all of his ridiculous standards, she is perfectly clean. She has no carnal urges to act on, and pulls out all the stops to avoid finding her mind even in the vicinity of the gutter. She's just as devoted to purity as he is. Grace shields Steph with her own purity, while Boy Jerry tries to convince Lumbrax that all the teens are dirty and need to be killed. Through this exchange, Boy Jerry lets it slip that he is Lumbrax's father. Actually called Little Jerry, Lumbrax is the secret bastard son of the camp directors, a result of their sinful carnal acts when they were younger. When Grace connects those dots, she uses the Jerry's hypocrisy to turn Little Jerry against them.
They fornicated! In your woods!
The Mad Woodsman kills his parents, then turns to Grace and hands his axe over to her, and walks off into the woods. The threat neutralized, Steph and Pete try to leave. Grace, however, has other plans. Now keep in mind the build-up to this. Grace makes it clear early on that she does not like punishment or fear as methods of teaching abstinence. She doesn't see getting Steph sent to camp as a bad thing or a punishment. She sees it as a positive learning opportunity. She doesn't want to scare the new kids with the horror story. She disagrees with Steph being sentenced to solitary confinement. The way Grace sees it, abstinence is natural and easy, and it's a definitive good. The environment and the activities of the camp should be enough for anyone because it's enough for her. If Steph just accepts and engages, she'll understand. She'll get better. Throughout the story, we see that Grace is really the only one here who's truly devoted to abstinence as this camp teaches it. Steph and Pete, obviously, are not here by choice and completely uninterested in abstaining. They both seem to have fairly healthy relationships with their own sexualities, all things considered. Gabe was putting on an act the whole time and wasn't who Grace thought he was. The other 2 lumber axe victims were killed when they snuck off to fool around together. And of course, the Jerrys have been lying hypocrites the entire time they've been in charge. Not only did they fornicate, they had a whole bastard about it and made their own hypocrisy everyone else's problem. They drilled abstinence lessons into their kid's head to the point that he kills people over it, and they've been covering up his murders and enabling him for years. In an attempt to make up for their own slip-up with the whole do as we say, not as we do act, they got countless children killed and sealed their own eventual fates. So Grace finds her trusted mentors with the dead bodies of 2 of her peers, and discovers not only have they been covering up regular murders, they're not even voluntarily celibate! It's likely she connected the dots on all the lumber axe victims not being committed to abstinence either. Then she comes face to face with the Mad Woodsman himself, and he doesn't harm her. Little Jerry is the only truly like-minded person Grace has found here, the one person as devoted to purity and abstinence as she is. Someone confused, frustrated, angered by all the horn dogs and hypocrites around him, betrayed by the people who taught him, who has the power to do something about it. And he gives that power to her. Little Jerry recognizes his own confusion and frustration in Grace, that inability to relate to her peers, to understand why she's been taught that abstinence is so righteous, but it's so hard for everyone but her to abide by. He sees this in her and gives her his weapon, effectively communicating his respect and understanding, telling her, hey, we're the same. I trust you with this. And Grace, whose sense of community at abstinence camp has been completely shattered, connects with Little Jerry just the same, sees, finally, the one person she can truly understand, and accepts his symbol of respect. The story ends with Grace, now armed with an axe and a wrathful motivation for a sense of control, running the camp herself and refusing to let anyone leave under implied threat of violence. She won't let this experience ruin camp for her. She's here to celebrate abstinence and teach the unsaved, and now that she's found a truly like-minded ally, now that she has the power behind her to enforce her beliefs, by God, she is going to enforce them. Just like in Perky's Buds, Grace was the one to save the day. Steph and Pete are alive because of her. Technically, she stopped the Mad Woodsman, but the threat's not gone because that understanding between her and Little Jerry confirmed her biases, pushing her further into her misguided motivations and awakening something much more aggressive and wrathful in her. She saw herself in the monster, so she became the monster's successor. She's not just a nuisance, now she's a straight-up threat. Part 3. Dirty Girl. With that base understanding of Grace as a person under our belt, we can step into a brand new timeline and take a look at her second journey as a central character. Out of the live read format and onto the stage, Grace made her debut to the Starkid fanbase at large in Nerdy Prudes Must Die. Where Abstinence Camp was a summer camp slasher, NPMD is a high school slasher, and also a musical. Grace kicks off the domino effect plot in the very first song when she catches Steph and Pete meet-cute cheating on a test and snitches to the teacher. Pete has also shape-shifted into a different actor, don't question it. The story promptly gets going on the Lotsky romance portion of the plot, and 12 minutes in, we get our first proper check-in with our girl. Grace is trying to get the homecoming dance cancelled, and has a run-in with some jocks fresh off the heels of picking on some loser. Brutish bully Max Jaegerman has the hots for Grace and advances in kind. When she's unreceptive to Max's request to carry her books, he pushes her boundaries and breaches into sexual harassment. Grace remains unrattled and asserts herself against his degrading remarks, and as she walks away, he explains to his lackey why he's interested in her.
Forbidden fruit, dickhole!
Here's where we'll take a sec to compare Max and Gabe and how Grace responds to their advances. There's specific context leading up to Gabe's approach in Abstinence Camp. Gabe is characterized as a friend. He and Grace are church buddies. They share similar ideals. They protest together. Grace sees him as a peer. His method of approach is incredibly tame and innocent. He tells her he likes her and gently presents the idea of them being more than friends. Grace doesn't register this for what it is because she can't fathom the idea of Gabe, who shares her beliefs, pursuing that kind of thing, let alone with her. She has no interest in dating, so naturally, Gabe doesn't either. Her understanding of Gabe as a person is incongruous with the idea that his fondness for her is anything but platonic. Max has a very different reputation from Gabe, and he is not a friend. His first scene, his first interaction with Grace, comes in the middle of his introductory villain song, where a gaggle of nerds have just told us exactly the kind of person Max is.
He's a literal monster.
He's terrifying and violent, he's cooler than you, and his sexual conquests are known throughout the school. He couldn't be more different from Grace, and she definitely knows that. She knows what Max is about. That's why she correctly clocks,
"Can I carry your books for you?"
as flirting when
I like you, Grace. What if we were more than friends?
goes right over her head. Gabe and Max both drop the nicer act after Grace is unresponsive to their advances, but notably, Gabe drops the act after Grace leaves, and Max drops the act right in front of her. It's a long game for Gabe, but Max isn't interested in a long game. As much as Grace knows who he knows himself too, and he's not gonna waste time wearing a mask. He's convinced there's a hidden side to Grace, and he's gonna prod until he gets what he wants. Max prods, and Grace pushes back. She, notably, was absent from the chorus of nerds heralding Max's arrival with fear, and at no point in this interaction is she intimidated by him. Max does not scare her. She's fully aware of his aggression, and she doesn't like him, but to her, he's not a threat. He's just another doomed soul, and his filth's never gonna reach her because she's so clearly above him in every way. She doesn't need to run and hide from Max like Pete does. She just looks him in the eyes, tells him he's hellbound, and marches on her way. The Lotsky plot thread chugs along, Pete sings a song about being a loser and gets the snot beaten out of him by Max, and then we get back to Grace having dinner with her parents that night. Mark and Karen Chasity are a pastel-colored caricature of the pleasant 50s ideal of good Christian parents, a happy couple who supports their daughter's interests and activities. Interests and activities that align with the beliefs they've taught her, of course. Over dinner, the Chastitys chat about an allegedly haunted house Mark is trying to sell, and Grace tells her parents about Max hitting on her. Max's reputation among the adults of Hatchetfield is much more positive than his reputation among his peers. Mark and Karen don't know him as a bully, they know him as the football star. Their immediate reaction to hearing he was interacting with their daughter is positive. Karen changes her tune about the book carrying, which they all evidently see as equivalent to sexual intimacy, but Mark doesn't think it's a big deal.
Do you think you should call the boy's father?
Oh, I don't know, Mother. I wasn't much older than him when I started carrying your books, Miss Chasity.
Dad, gross!
It gives the impression that if Grace expressed interest in going on a date with Max, her dad at least might be okay with it. Grace is of course not interested in this, reiterating that she doesn't think about that sort of thing. That sort of thing being sex, specifically. We really don't know what Grace's thoughts on romance are, because her priority is very much her sexual purity. Romance is more an unspoken inevitability as far as she's concerned, the thing that allegedly leads to sex. We know from Abstinence Camp, as well as her reiterating her disinterest here, that Grace takes great pride in her complete lack of sexual desire. Abstinence is something she values very highly, and it comes incredibly easily to her. She can confidently assure her parents that they don't need to worry about her in that regard. With that in mind, it's easy to see why what comes next throws her off so badly.
Mom, will you pass the butt stuff?
Grace has some very unfortunate Freudian slips in front of her parents, indicating that while mentally she is not interested in Max, physically might be another story. Mark and Karen's reactions are super telling. That immediate discomfort, the way they awkwardly approach it, asking if she's okay, in a way that subtextually screams, "Please God, we do not want to deal with this." It's far too uncomfortable of a topic for them to handle properly, and God knows Grace is way too entrenched in the idea that sexual attraction is inherently shameful to feel comfortable trying to talk it out with them. So the solution is to sweep it under the rug as best as possible. Karen draws a bath to help Grace cool down, notably away from her and Mark. In the privacy of the tub, Grace fantasizes about Max joining her. A version of Max who's irresistibly drawn to her. A version of Max with a hidden Jesus-loving side he shows to her. A somewhat more palatable version of Max in that regard, but retaining what attracts her to the real thing. His appearance, his attraction to her, his straightforward aggression, and his existence as a temptation. Grace's fantasy is represented through one of my favorite songs in the whole series, Dirty Girl. It flawlessly communicates exactly what draws Grace to Max as an idea, and what she would want from the most ideal form of intimacy with him. Grace likes that Max is attracted to her. She likes feeling desirable. She wants to be a temptation for him as much as he's a temptation for her. Fantasy Max visits her where she's physically vulnerable, and then puts himself on display for her, showing off his body for her to admire. He embodies temptation, and his lyrics in the first verse reflect this too.
You know it's wrong, I know it's right. I'll never ever tell you to behave. I'ma love ya all night
Grace then turns the tables, taking control of the situation and the song in the second verse. She pushes him down and stands above him and offers her own ultimatums.
You want me, can't be skipping school. For shame, I am expecting you to behave. If you want a tour of the house, you better straighten out your crooked ways.
Fantasy Max responds well to this. He lets her take control, he watches her with admiration, he enjoys when she pushes and pulls him. This is what Grace wants. She likes Max's strength and aggression, but she wants to be in charge of it. She wants a Max receptive to this. She wants a Max who tempts her, but also admires and obeys her. Their physicality so far communicates a lot as well. Fantasy Max has gotten close to Grace throughout this. He's entered her space, but he's not the one to initiate touch. Grace does that. She touches him first, and throughout her verse, she's the one to touch him. She's in control, and when Max does eventually touch her, it's when the second chorus hits and they're in sync. Every time they touch, their choreography is synchronized. And every time we kiss, I swear I could fly. There's an equilibrium in Grace's fantasy, a push and pull, a mutual understanding that this is temptation, this is dirty, the pleasure is guilty, what she wants from him is physical and nothing more.
Won't you love me like you don't care?
I don't care about you.
The bridge is when Grace starts to resist again, her and Max's lyrics overlapping.
I'm a good girl.
Physically, they move apart from each other. Grace gets back in the tub and Max starts to leave as Grace denies her desires. Very notably, I think, the bridge ends with Grace still asserting she's a good girl, and Fantasy Max simultaneously saying, "You're my good girl." This is when Grace gives in and accepts the fantasy with open arms, and she and Fantasy Max are in sync again. Grace wants to have her cake and eat it too. She wants to enjoy her sexual desires without them negating her identity as a pure, morally sound person. As much as she'll go on to deny it, there's a part of her that wants so badly to let go. The fantasy ends, her vision of Max disappears, and Grace is left alone in the bath with her arousal, wandering hands, and instant shame. Not only has she had impure thoughts, she's given into them, she's touched herself. This pushes her straight into an identity crisis for which she blames Max, having awakened these feelings in her. Such a massive blow to her sense of self has her immediately spiraling and ready to do something drastic. Max made her feel this way. Max is corrupting her. Naturally, she concludes she has to snuff out her desires at the source. The next day, Grace catches up with a few peers who also have reason to want Max dealt with. Pete, because Max beat the snot out of him last night. Steph, because Max beat the snot out of Pete last night. And Pete's friends Ruth and Richie, two other nerds who Max has beaten the snot out of before. Grace suggests they all team up to take Max down, and brings them to the old Whalen place, the haunted house her dad's been trying to sell. Relying on the urban legend surrounding the ghosts of the late Whalens and their demon-worshipping cult, Grace's plan is to lure Max to the house, scare him with a prank, and spread the video evidence around school to humiliate him and take away his power. This is a straight-up revenge plan, which is new for what we've seen of Grace, because unlike the pot farm, a danger to the community at large, or Steph's sex addiction, a danger to Steph herself, Grace's primary motivation to take down Max isn't helping other people, it's helping herself. Putting a stop to his bullying and standing up for nerdkind is part of it, definitely. But if that was her central goal, 1, she would have done this years ago, and 2, she'd probably be approaching it differently. Her personal stakes and sexual frustrations are clouding her motivations. That's why this approach is more actively aggressive than her previous solutions. Grace takes charge of the group and, with some convincing, gets the others on board with the plan. They bond, get everything all set up, they put Pete and Ruth in silly little costumes, and Max arrives for a party, stepping right into their trap. It doesn't quite go according to plan. For one, Max ends up really appreciating the prank. It actually seems like he might be reconsidering his view of the nerds, and then the floor gives out under him and he falls 3 stories. Banged up and impaled, Max dies from the fall, swearing vengeance on nerdy prudes, and the whole group flies into a panic. Except Grace. To Grace, they got exactly what they wanted.
Max Jaegerman was a menace, and now he's gone!
She's able to justify everything about the situation. They didn't break into the Whalen place. Her dad's the realtor. She had a key. They never directly physically touched Max. In fact, throughout the planning process, Grace emphasized that they weren't going to get physical. Their intentions were righteous. They wanted to end his reign of terror. It's not their fault that the floor gave out and he fell. She and the others are entirely blameless. This happened because it was meant to. Because God knew that Max was a bad person who needed to go. So God took him. This is righteous punishment for Max, and a reward for Grace for taking action against him. Grace is secure in her conviction that she and the others did nothing wrong, but she's also smart enough to know that no one else will buy that if they're found out. So she once again takes charge of the group, and at her persuasion they dismember Max's body and bury it in the floorboards. You know, good Christian things to do. Just girly things, in fact. Grace then disappears for the remainder of the first act. 2 weeks pass, the other kids sing a song about how much better things are without Max. I think the reason Grace is excluded from this part is because even without Max, things at school basically stay the same for her. She's still an outcast that nobody likes. The cool kids aren't going to start being nice to her like they're nice to Ruth and Richie because Max is gone. He never affected anyone's opinion of her. She doesn't get to share in this camaraderie because things don't improve for her the way they do for the others. Anyway, right before the homecoming football game, Richie's left alone in the locker room to be confronted and killed by the vengeful spirit of Max, back to make good on his threat. End of Act 1. Intermission. The Birdie Song Thrush comparison. Birdie Song Thrush is one of the two main characters of Lisa Hannah-Walt's Tuca and Birdie. She's an anxious songbird searching for self-empowerment, working at a magazine publishing company, and pursuing a baking career on the side. She has an adventurous best friend named Tuca and a long-term live-in domestic boyfriend named Speckle. She has very little in common with Grace Chasity, except for one thing. They both fantasize about abusive men. For this intermission, before we get into how Grace's arc progresses and wraps up in Act 2, I'd like to do a little comparison. As we'll go on to see, Grace's sexual awakening arc is deeply unhealthy, intentionally, and I think it'll be interesting and valuable to compare her to a character with a healthier arc. Now, obviously, Tuca and Birdie is a 3-season TV show helmed by women, and Nerdy Prudes Must Die is a 2.5-hour musical written by 2 men. I don't think anyone will disagree with me that the cartoon had more time, tact, and likely interest in portraying what it tackles with the proper depth and respect. Like, just objectively, NPMD is way more bloated as a story. It has its pitfalls in part due to just juggling focus. At the same time, I think the two materials are communicating different things in how they tackle similar situations, and it'll be useful to compare. Throughout the first season of T&B, Birdie struggles with her anxiety and finding self-empowerment in the face of experiencing constant sexual harassment. Coworkers and strangers harass her, and when she takes a bakery apprenticeship with award-winning chef Pastry Pete, he harasses her too. Pastry Pete is domineering and aggressive, and on Birdie's first day working with him, he's physically predatory towards her. Birdie is both uncomfortable with his treatment of her and privately aroused by it. She stays working with him, grappling with being attracted to him while simultaneously having commitment anxiety about her relationship with Speckle. Birdie's inner conflict culminates when a new bird, Dakota, gets an apprenticeship alongside her. They become friends, working together for a day, but when Pastry Pete returns to mentor Dakota, he repeats his prior predatory behavior. Dakota stands up to him and quits, feeling betrayed by Birdie because Birdie not only didn't warn her, she defends Pete. In her shame over this, too afraid to face Pete or go home and face Speckle, Birdie skips town with Tuca. They end up staying in Birdie's family's cabin at the Jelly Lakes, a place Birdie is very reluctant to be. She eventually confides in Tuca that she used to swim here as a child, and one year a lifeguard sexually assaulted her. On top of being uncomfortable here, she feels guilty and ashamed that she let Pastry Pete get away with his behavior. The next morning, Tuca finds Birdie swimming in the lake. Her goal as a child was to swim to Peanut Butter Island, and that goal was ruined for her by the assault. Now she wants to reclaim it, and with encouragement from Tuca and her old coach, she succeeds, and progresses in coming to terms with what happened to her. Feeling more empowered to face things, she and Tuca return home. In the Season 1 finale, Birdie works to patch things up with Speckle and confront Pastry Pete. She leaves her apprenticeship to start her own business, and when Pete gaslights and physically threatens her, Tuca gets it on camera and they're able to publicly out him as an abuser. She has to continue dealing with him throughout the series, an unfortunately realistic occurrence, but he doesn't have a hold on her career anymore, at least. In Season 2, Birdie starts going to therapy. She initially looks for a one-time therapist to give her a surefire cure to avoid panic attacks, but the therapist she sticks with, Dr. Joanne, encourages long-term work and utilizing her support systems. This all leads up to the main point of comparison I want to discuss for Birdie and Grace. Season 2, Episode 5, Vibe Check. Birdie has a fantasy about Pastry Pete that really works for her, if you get my drift. It makes her feel ashamed and uncomfortable because this guy treated her terribly. Why would she have fantasies about that? First, she blames her toy for the fantasy and chucks it. Then it happens again. She decides her mattress is at fault and chucks it. When the fantasies still continue, she worries that it's a mental problem stemming from her trauma and approaches it with her therapist. Dr. Joanne assures her that the kinds of fantasies she's having are perfectly normal and don't mean there's anything wrong with her. That maybe her interest in power dynamics is related to the assault as part of her personal healing journey, because this way she gets to be safe and in control while experiencing them. Or maybe it has nothing to do with the assault at all. Maybe she would still find these dynamics arousing if it had never happened.
Who knows why brains do these things? Brains are crazy!
When Birdie is still worried about how this might affect her relationship with Speckle, the doc suggests she talk to him. Speckle, throughout the series, has consistently shown himself to be an excellent boyfriend. He values Birdie's comfort, he's receptive to her wants and needs, he supports her, he encourages her to be communicative with him. He's a good guy. Of course, he understands when Birdie confides in him. He doesn't judge her for her more taboo fantasies. In fact, he offers her a safe space to indulge in them. They can explore some rougher play together because Birdie trusts that her comfort and safety is a priority for Speckle. Tuca and Birdie is a show that's highly regarded among its audience for its portrayal of Birdie as a survivor, and this episode is no exception. It's comforting for a lot of viewers to see Birdie learn that these kinds of desires aren't shameful. It's not something she has to work through or fix. She can come to terms with it and explore it in a healthy way. It's okay. Now, obviously, a big aspect of what sets Birdie and Grace's situations apart from each other is the differing contexts of their characters. Birdie is a grown woman in a committed, healthy, intimate relationship. Grace is a teenager deeply entrenched in Christian purity beliefs. Birdie's shame about her fantasy comes from a place of anxiety regarding her mental health and the trauma she's fully aware of, rather than religiously motivated shame that comes from seeing sexuality as inherently dirty. Birdie's concern surrounds the central person and nature of her fantasy, while Grace is primarily concerned that she had a fantasy at all. It's likely a more subconscious anxiety for Grace, that she's having these desires about a boy who crossed her boundaries and harassed her, likely does this to other girls, and is just generally a violent person. But it's not what she's focused on. Grace's view of sexuality is so fundamentally unhealthy that the possible concern of being attracted to her harasser doesn't even occur to her on a level she's cognizant of. She would feel the same shame regardless of who the subject of her fantasies was. Grace's shame stems from trauma too, but not trauma she's aware of. It comes from her religious trauma, the deeply held and unhealthy beliefs about sexuality and desire that she's internalized because that's what she was taught is right. Birdie deals with Pastry Pete externally when necessary, when he blocks her business from getting off the ground and when he threatens her. When he appears in her fantasies, however, she feels no need to deal with him to make them stop, because from the start she recognizes this as a personal, internal thing. Grace deals with Max externally every time because there's no difference for her. Max is just as much to blame for her private thoughts about him as he is for directly harassing her. She doesn't recognize her attraction to him as internal. She and Birdie both initially feel they need to fix this, but they go about it in very different ways. Birdie's storyline regarding her fantasy is a healthy and comforting one. It communicates that it's okay to have fantasies like this. Birdie being attracted to aggressive behavior doesn't mean that she believes what that lifeguard or Pastry Pete did to her was okay, or that she wants it to happen again. It just means she finds aggression attractive in an abstract sense, and it's okay for her to explore that in her fantasies or consensually with Speckle. It's healthy and fine because it's hers, it's private, and she's safe. Grace's storyline regarding her fantasy, as we're about to see, is a deeply unhealthy cautionary tale. Because her view of sexuality is so inherently warped, and because she doesn't have anyone she can confide in about it, there's no hope of her reconciling with these feelings the way Birdie does. She tries to deal with it externally, it goes wrong, she doubles down, convincing herself it was meant to go this way. And in Act 2, as things start to crumble around her, we'll examine her downward spiral and what her ending communicates about the danger of sexual repression. Part 3.5. Dirty Girl, Act 2. Okay, back to the main story. Act 2 picks up the Monday morning after the homecoming football game. Grace wakes up, pleased to be seemingly rid of her Max fantasies. The crumbling starts immediately, though, when she finds out her dad has sold the Whalen place and something has been found there. Now is when Grace panics, heading to school and admitting to her manslaughter accomplices, notably down a party member, a possible loose end at the house.
I can't find my WWJD bracelet. I took it off when we were dismembering the body, but I put it back on, right? You saw me with it on, right?
I see our girl graduated top of her class at the Alex Browning School of Incredibly Guilty Crime Scene Behavior. As she insists nothing can be traced back to them, the principal calls the group to his office to speak to the police. Because Detective Shapiro and Officer Bailey insist on being as vague as possible, the gang assume they're being asked about Max, so naturally they panic and instantly out themselves as the guiltiest people who've ever lived. The cops aren't asking about Max, though, they're asking about Richie, who, as the audience knows, was killed by Max's vengeful spirit. The gang doesn't know that, though. All they know is Max's body has been found in the Whalen place, the cops are hot on their trail, and whoever Richie's killer is, they have it out for nerdy prudes. Grace is suspicious that one of them snitched, and Steph suggests that someone else might have been in the house that night. That gives Grace an idea that she's sure will get the cops off their trail. We see her starting to spin out now because the idea of being caught is incongruous with her conviction that she is blameless. If Max's death was an act of God, then God should be protecting her from consequence because this wasn't her fault. As long as she can prevent herself and the others from being caught, she remains in the right, her convictions remain intact. That becomes her main motivation in the second act, to avoid consequence. So then Ruth sings a song or something and Max kills her. Grace spins a story about Hatchetfield's rival town, Clivesdale, killing Max and Richie to ensure they'd win the big game. Ideally, this would get the cops off their trail and send them on an aimless search for the killer in Clivesdale. Unfortunately for Grace, Detective Shapiro already found her bracelet at the crime scene, and by blatantly lying, all she's done is make herself look more guilty. Also, she finds out Ruth is dead. Here we see Grace's already in progress downward spiral take a sharp decline. She's cornered, there's no argument she can make that will get her out of this hole, and another one of her peers is dead. She's sure this was God's plan, but now he's abandoned her. What does that mean for her faith? Why is she facing punishment for something that should obviously be so righteous? God took Max off her plate right when he became an inconvenience to her. Why would he do that just to let her be punished for it? Facing arrest with her worldview crumbling around her, Grace curses God, steals Bailey's gun, and makes a run for it. Steph and Pete sing a song in the coffee shop before Grace runs in, and look! It's Emma! She's interacting with Emma in a different context! It's fun to see them interact as a barista and a patron knowing that Grace got Emma arrested in another timeline. Anyway, her plan having failed, Grace now plans to flee the country and take Steph and Pete with her. She is desperate to avoid consequence by any means possible. Plus there's a killer after them. She doesn't say it, but she'd probably like to avoid Steph and Pete dying also. Mostly Steph, I bet. I don't think Grace cares about Pete that much.
What?!
Officer Bailey pursues Grace into the coffee shop, but the trio still manages to escape when Bailey attacks this random brown-suited guy who, for some strange reason, I get the impression, doesn't like musicals. Anyway, Bailey attacks this dude for literally no reason. The B in ACAB stands for Bailey. Grace continues to spiral. Her shame over her lust hangs over her, her morals are slipping, and her faith in God is crumbling. She's losing her sense of identity, and she doesn't know how to fix this. Clearly, if God isn't going to shield her from the consequences, maybe this is her fault. Maybe she needs to face it. She offers to turn herself in and let Steph and Pete get away, but she doesn't get the chance. Steph's father, Mayor Solomon Lauder, catches up with them and provides them some exposition as well as their solution. The legends about the Whalen place are true. The house is in fact haunted, and Max's death triggered an old spell placed to ensure nothing truly dies there. He's back, a vengeful, powerful, untouchable spirit, and there's only one thing that can stop him. Solomon brings the trio to the source of the Whalen's power, a book that connects the user with the dark gods the Whalens and their cult worshipped. Those gods are their way out.
To survive this night, you'll have to strike a bargain with the Lords in Black.
Max makes himself known to the trio now. They escape momentarily as Grace looks through the black book to figure out how to perform the ritual. There are 5 black altars in Hatchetfield, specific places where the Lords in Black can be summoned, and one of them is the high school, so that's where they have to go. They're apprehended by Detective Shapiro before they can get there, though, and as Grace once again attempts to convince her of their innocence, she gives an incredibly revealing spiel.
Imagine you're a good Christian. Sometimes you have to listen to people and believe what they say, even if it sounds crazy, against everything you know, in spite of all common sense.
That implies Grace has always had religious doubts to some degree, but her identity as a good Christian is so important to her that she just goes along with it and believes what she's supposed to, even if it doesn't sound right to her. This is part of why her spiral is hitting her so hard. She can't just believe all of this away. Max comes back in and crashes the squad car, giving the group the opportunity to escape and make their way to the high school. There they perform the ritual and summon the boys! The 5 specialist boys in the whole universe! Look at them! Look! I actually got to see this show live. I was there in the audience, and as someone who's very mentally ill about Hatchetfield lore, getting to see the summoning live in person, I thought I was gonna straight up die. Unreal experience, actually. I can't even tell ya. Okay, back to the analysis. I just had to gush for a second. The Lords in Black agree to take Max off their hands, but in exchange, one of them has to sacrifice the thing they cherish most. In the moment, they single out Steph, whose most cherished thing is Pete, apparently. Sure. Vice versa, too. As far as this duo is concerned, one of them has to die. Pete wants to be the one, so they quietly forget Grace exists and sing a fucking song, and Steph tries to shoot Pete, but schwupsie! Max catches the bullet and interrupts the sacrifice before it can happen. Max breaks Pete's arm and closes in to kill Steph, and like an echo across timelines, Grace once again runs in at the last second to save her. In a reversal of their inciting interaction, Grace hits on Max, tempting him away from his unholy mission. She tells him he was right about her. She's a dirty girl and she's ready to accept it, and she wants him right here, right now. Max, of course, gives in, and they hook up off stage, under the bleachers. Unbeknownst to Max, though, this is Grace's sacrifice. The thing she cherished most was her chastity, and she just gave it up. In accordance with their deal, the Lords in Black come to collect, and Max is dragged down to Drowsy Town, saving Hatchetfield from his murderous rampage. We don't get to see any hints of Grace coming to terms with making this sacrifice because we're focused on the Lotsky misdirection of it all, but it's very easy to fill in the gaps. This began with Grace's attraction to Max. She lost her ability to justify Max's accident as an act of God as the situation got worse and worse and her faith crumbled around her. Right when she was about to give up, unable to rely on the Christian God, she was faced with 5 new gods. 5 gods who she was able to summon, who tangibly appeared, who spoke directly to her.
We've been watching you, Gracie. Someone's been a little naughty.
And told her exactly what she needed to do to end this. 5 gods who offered her a sense of control again, something new to have faith in. So she steadies herself and puts her faith in the Lords in Black. She leans into the thing her god would punish her for. She plays out a new version of her fantasy. She tempts Max and he follows where she leads. She's in control. She's getting something more out of this, something that will make it worth it. She indulges in her desire and maintains her view of herself as righteous. She uses her mutual attraction to Max to finally destroy him once and for all. Our finale takes place at the homecoming dance, where Grace is in attendance with her date Jason, a former lackey of Max's who goes to her church. We get a whole fake-out happy ending with a song that would be right at home in a Disney Channel original movie. Grace leaves the dance with Jason, and it appears they had a nice time. Jason apologizes for bullying her in the past, saying he always thought she was pretty, and Grace asks him to kiss her. I really love Grace's fake-out happy ending because it's the exact kind of ending I think she would get if she had a healthy sexual awakening arc. If Grace was able to come to terms with her sexuality, learn that attraction and desire isn't wrong or dirty, and reconcile her attraction to Max as something personal and private that she's allowed to feel without acting on it, this would make sense. It would show growth for her to have decided against canceling the dance, for her to be tentatively pursuing a relationship with Jason, another jock, likely with some similar physical traits to Max, but who's been shown to be significantly more palatable. Jason is nicer, he goes to church sometimes, he's open to meeting Grace where she's at. He's approachable as a potential partner. It's a step in the right direction. But Grace's sexual awakening is not healthy. She's not pursuing a legitimate relationship with Jason, she's pursuing something else. When he indulges her with a chaste little peck on the lips, she changes her tune.
Really, Jason? Kissing on the first date?
She pulls the black book out of her backpack, revealing that she kept it and has been relishing in the power it gives her. The date was a trap to expose Jason as a dirty dude, just like Max, and as penance for his filth, Grace will devour his soul. She intends to devour the souls of every dirty dude she can find, gaining power and serving the Lords in Black in a crusade against perversion. And it's so important that the finale song, Grace's villain song, is a direct parallel to Max's villain song in the Act 1 finale.
Nerdy prudes must die! Nerdy prudes must die!
Dirty dudes must die! Dirty dudes must die!
It explicitly confirms what's been subtext this whole time, that Grace and Max are parallel characters. On the surface and aesthetically, they're opposites. Grace is a prim, prissy church girl, Max is an aggressive, vulgar jock. Grace is a good girl, Max is a bad boy. but taking it deeper, they're actually extremely similar. Narratively, they're both personifications of behaviors and aspects of society that the show is criticizing. Grace is a puritanical Christian zealot who forces her beliefs on others. Max is an unstoppable bully who faces no consequence. They both see themselves as the final authority. Grace is a moral authority, Max is a social authority. They each have their own ideal form of order. Grace is being that society adheres to her own religious beliefs and moral code, and Max is being that the school adheres to his demanded social hierarchy. They both work to maintain their form of order. Grace protests unsavory practices, enforces school rules, and gets actively involved in people's lives when she sees fit. Max, obviously, uses violence to make his peers fall in line. And it's not a coincidence that Grace is also prone to turning towards violence once the means find their way into her hands. What they want and what they believe is the only right way, and they will not be convinced otherwise. Max says, straight up, the nerds he bullies are nerds because he said so.
I willed it into existence.
It doesn't matter if they stand up to him, if they assert themselves. He wants to hurt them, so he's gonna. It's as simple as that. And when he comes back as a vengeful spirit, we see him warp the meaning of nerd to give him an excuse to kill Mayor Lauder. He makes the rules. He decides who's cool and who's not, and he decides who lives and who dies. Grace in the finale is the same way. She most likely asked Jason to the dance. She asks him to kiss her. She grabs his hand and places it on her thigh. Jason had no chance. He's dirty because Grace says so. She makes the rules, and as she spirals further into madness, surely she'll bend them as much as she wants. Their biggest difference beyond the surface at this point is that Max was self-aware, and Grace is not. That's why this time, Grace's descent into madness doesn't come from seeing herself in the monster. Kinda the opposite, actually. Grace hates Max. Rightfully, he's fucking awful. She hates everything about him. His vulgarity, how he treats her, how he treats others, and most of all, she hates what he awakens in her. She hates that she reciprocates his attraction, that she might be dirty like him. She incites the conflict of the show by trying to rid herself of that connection to him, their mutual attraction. This ending, Grace hunting down dirty dudes, is the direct result of her being forced to tangibly indulge in that attraction. That's what I mean when I say her sexual awakening is super fucking unhealthy. A healthy arc would not have ended with Grace hooking up with Max. There's no universe where that outcome is anything but harmful. A healthy arc would have ended with Grace understanding that her attraction and desires are entirely neutral and not something to be ashamed of. It's fine for her to feel those things, and it's fine she feels them about Max. It's entirely possible for the fact that Max is a bad, dangerous person who she doesn't like to coexist with her finding him physically attractive. It doesn't have to mean anything. Grace assigns meaning to it because of her preconceived, damaging notions about these desires. She's been taught that it's shameful and wrong, so she sees it as shameful and wrong, and she fixates on it. She makes it a problem when it does not have to be, because she doesn't know any better. She has no opportunity to learn any better. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Grace sees thought as a precursor to action, or at least she sees thought and action as equal in merit. If her thoughts are impure, eventually her actions will be impure, thus her thoughts make her impure. That's not true, but it is kinda what ends up happening. Because of a domino effect that began with her actions, her plan to maintain her purity that backfired, she wound up backed into a corner where her only options were to let her friends die or hook up with Max. It's not much of a choice. And, I think it's safe to say this circumstance is not an ideal one to lose your virginity in, especially for someone who values purity as highly as Grace. Her most cherished thing wasn't her parents or a friend, it was the concept of her chastity. That's, deeply sad, isn't it? She values her pure, chaste reputation over any person. Now that's gone, and she's gotta live with it. That's trauma. Grace was traumatized. Hooking up with Max wasn't Grace accepting her sexuality, it was her accepting a new faith. She makes this sacrifice trusting in the Lords in Black and turns to them to reconcile with what she's lost. She turns to the gods who helped her when the Christian god abandoned her, the gods who gave her the power to put an end to the literal monster. She defeated Max by using her sexuality as a weapon, and the Lords in Black rewarded her for it. This allows her to see her sacrifice as righteous, and her sexuality as a new kind of holy tool. She'll lure boys in, trick them into revealing themselves as dirty, and destroy them so they can't tempt anyone else. So she can get revenge on the cool kids on behalf of her fellow nerds. So she can take her trauma out on someone who she believes deserves it. This is how she copes with what happened to her, and what she had to do. She's broken her own moral rules, and now she twists them to fit her new agenda. She goes on believing that she is in the right. Once again, Grace finds herself with power and poses a threat to the people of Hatchetfield. Once again, Grace has become a mirror image of the monster she vanquished. Part 4. Workin' Boys Interlude. Grace's role in Workin' Boys is so small I can breeze through it real quick. Watch. Grace is in the audience for opening night of this new musical,
Workin' Girls,
to see Ruth. After Act 1, the curtains rise on a massacre. Writer-director Henry Higgins has killed the entire cast because the show not living up to his vision made him snap. He holds the audience hostage and tries to put the show on properly himself. When one guy tries to leave, Higgins shoots him in the head and the audience flies into a panicked frenzy. Grace and Richie are seated next to Officer Bailey and beg him to do something, reminding him he's a cop with a gun. Chicken shit Bailey, who needs to die, gives Grace his gun and tells her to save them, and she does. She kills Higgins, immediately latching on to the power and reciting a fitting Bible verse.
When the Lord thy God hath delivered it into thine hands, thou shalt smite every male thereof with the edge of the sword!
Bing bang boom, once again Grace saves the day after being given a weapon, and promptly goes right off the deep end with power. Part conclusion. Grace Chasity is a personification of Christian zealotry and how harmful abstinence-only purity culture can be. She's intentionally obnoxious and frustrating, she's self-righteous and stubborn, she ends both of her two central appearances as the new antagonist. She reminds me a little of the girl I knew in high school, who had a sweet demeanor and no qualms expressing her distaste with my queerness, but if anyone openly disagreed with her religion, it was a step too far.
Does your phone plan cover calls to hell?
Hell?
She's bisexual and dead. Where else would she be?
Sorry, you're cancelled.
She's a character we're meant to disagree with, and if you're not interested in sympathizing with her, it can be easy to see her as just that surface-level caricature. But we should sympathize with her. If you follow her line of thinking, it's really not hard to see where she's coming from. She's complex and compelling, and I don't know, I see a little of my own teenage self in her shame. I was never in it nearly as deep as she is, fortunately, and it's something I was able to grow out of, but I kinda get it, you know? I feel for her. As much as her zealotry can be comedically infuriating, it's also incredibly, genuinely tragic.
If you think about the implications.
Grace is a girl steeped in religious trauma, and she's not even aware of it. And in both of her main appearances, you can see where if things were different, maybe she could change for the better. But things are the way they are. If things were different, she could recognize Lumberacks as a dark mirror of her, as a cautionary tale, the result of the Jerrys taking their own shame out on their kid, pushing their abstinence teachings to the point his wrathful repulsion towards consensual intimacy is baked into his identity, to the point he kills people over it and his parents are too scared to do anything but enable him. But Grace seeing herself in Little Jerry doesn't set off alarm bells, it validates her. Lumberacks isn't a cautionary tale, he's a mentor, he's someone to emulate. If things were different, she could talk to someone about her Max fantasies. Her parents, a counselor, hell, Steph would be a great person for her to talk to. But because of how she was raised and taught, she could never fathom having that kind of conversation with anyone. It's too shameful, she's supposed to be better. And let's be real, Steph isn't someone she'd ever turn to for help. Steph is the one who needs her help. Grace wouldn't look to someone below her on the moral ladder. She has to deal with it herself. When it comes to Grace and her patterns, the echoes of her arcs, a few things are clear. She's always the savior, she parallels the monster, she always ends worse than she began. And something I noticed specifically when I was taking notes for this video, Grace is constantly let down by adults, particularly adults she should be able to trust. From the start, the first adult we see her interact with is Emma in Perky's Buds, an inherently untrustworthy adult by Grace's standards, an adult who's pushing drugs on the community and kills animals, an adult Grace ends up having to save. We talked about abstinence camp. The Jerrys are mentors and temporary guardian figures. They're tasked with teaching the campers the value of abstinence and keeping them safe over the summer. They fail at both things. They're hypocrites who had a child out of wedlock, and they're constantly letting their child kill campers. In Nerdy Prudes Must Die, Grace is very clearly a product of her parents. Her values are the spitting image of Mark and Karen's. She's the way she is because of them. They taught her to value purity above all else. They taught her that intimacy outside of the correct context, marriage between a man and woman, is sinful. They taught her that desire and pleasure are shameful. Even if there are hints that Mark may be the less strict of the two, he still very much encourages these attitudes.
And you know as well as I do, young lady, this is a no-moan household.
When Grace agonizes over her budding sexuality, Mark and Karen behave in a way that makes it clear they are not comfortable discussing it with her, that it's not something to discuss, it's something that shouldn't exist. It's something she has to hide. Thus, there's nobody she can comfortably confide in. Mark and Karen fail to offer her the proper support. She feels she has to deal with it herself because that's what they taught her. Adults in general fail the kids in this story. When Steph intends to go to the principal about Max, Richie retorts,
If you think the principal cares more about us than the outcome of the big game, then you are willfully naive.
All the nerds know that no adults are ever going to do anything about Max, and by implication that includes Grace. We've seen her take action through authority figures before. If she believed the principal, or a counselor, or any other adult would deal with Max, she'd take that route. But she doesn't. She knows if anyone's going to take action against him, it has to be them. She goes on to feel abandoned by God, the ultimate authority figure, some might say. Also, the whole being pursued by cops thing probably doesn't help her feelings about relying on adults. And speaking of cops, in Workin' Boys, Grace and Richie beg the cop in the building to do something because, most people are taught that cops are there to keep them safe. When Bailey fails, Grace has to take her safety and the safety of the whole audience into her own hands. It's a theme. Grace is constantly failed by adults she should be able to rely on. That adds so much to her character. She is who she is because of how she was raised. She relies almost exclusively on herself and the teachings of the Bible. She buckles under the weight of it when the adults fail her, and when that happens, she clings to whatever gives her a sense of control. She clings to the Mad Woodsman's axe to regain control of her beloved summer activity and do what the camp directors failed to. She clings to the Black Book to regain control over her sense of identity and dole out the justice no one else would. She clings to Bailey's gun to regain control over her own safety. And she justifies it as she justifies everything she does, through her religion. Moral of the multiple stories, can someone get this poor girl some better guidance before she snaps and kills again? Maybe sit her down to watch some moral oral? Maybe that would fix her. Or it might make her worse, I don't know. Hard cut to Steph being sent to abstinence camp for the is one of the 7 deadly sins. Ottering God means... Ottering? Grace's primary motivation is to take a shit. But she doesn't get the chance. Steph's fodder? We get a whole fake-out happy ending with a song that It's entirely possible for the fact that Max is a dad. Dad? He's not a dad! Huh?